Yeah, it's up there.
Oh, it is? Cool. I should
It's
probably
it.
actually track this. Yes, I
Oh,
was having,
yep, there it is.
we are. Cool Gabiners. Okay, let me track. So you got notified?
Yep, I'm reposted now.
Oh, look at you. Okay, we're here. We're live. All right, I'm gonna pull myself back up here and woo. Okay, so let me change our blocks here. I know we're live. I should have done this before, but life is good. I'm just going to say hello to everybody while I'm doing this. Good morning. How did my little blocky change? Hold on. Oh, gallery view. There we go. There we go. Side by side, standing strong. Good morning. This is Catherine Toon, and I have Jermaine Thomas, who I was able to snag at the last moment. I was so glad because he's been super busy, super swamped, and graciously agreed to take his Sunday morning to spend with us for a little bit to talk about all the stuff that's coming at us from all the racial tensions, and addressing that with love, with intelligence, all of that. I've been reading Jermaine's stuff. I told him, I'm going to snag your stuff. So I've just been pulling it off his site. It's just so many thought-provoking um, nugget, getting to the heart of
Yes.
issues that are so complex. This is a complex issue.
Yes, it is.
And we're not going to navigate this pointing fingers and shaming, but we all need to come apart in our thinking and how we
Yeah.
relate to one another. At the end of the day, God is love, love never fails. We're going to resonate on, and we were created to be one in love.
Yes.
So that's, how do we do that? How do we start to bridge? So Jermaine, for those of you who may not know, because I don't know how much you've been on this platform before, I don't think that much. Sort of introduce us to who you are. Jermaine's amazing, by the way. I love him. I'm so excited to have him on this morning. So tell us about kind of your world and that kind of thing, and just get us kind of up to speed with Jermaine in at least a little nutshell.
Sure. Thank you, first of all, Dr. Catherine, for inviting me on. And believe it or not, I'm like super starred out right now because your book, Marked by Love, and just the whole goal of family and yourself, and just following your ministry has been really inspirational. And we have a mutual connection too with Bishop Jamie Englehart,
Yeah.
and he sings your praises as well.
Ah,
But yeah, just so yeah, it's just honored to be here. But just real brief, I've been almost 20 years in social services, and between, so dualistically speaking, like social services and then outreach ministry, substance abuse outreach, working with men and women navigating out of the lifestyle of drug addiction, pastoral counseling, then in the social service arena, working with youth that were in that, failed placement, DCFS, the Department of Children and Family Services, group homes, at-risk youth, and families. And today I'm work with Department of Children and Family Services on the other side, as a actual DCFS worker. And my function is permanency planning. And basically, this is on the other side of investigations. I don't do investigations. This is, I call it like an apostolic function, because I'm there to give families tools that they need to bring families together, and to
beautiful.
restore families. And so a part of this function is restoration and restoring families. And then currently a professor with World Bible School University, and father, husband, live on the south of Chicago, grew up in Chicago, but I live south now. And yeah, that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Well, it's a big nutshell. Let me say, that's amazing what you do. One of the things that was really, and it might be a good jumping off part, but when you talked about the restoration of families,
Yeah,
God made us one in Him,
yeah,
right? And there is one race, the human race, that we're
yeah,
all part of. And so we're the human race is at odds with one another. There's confusion, there's suspicion, there's a ton of pain. There's finger point, there's all that that's going on. There's injustice. You can go on and on. Our family is not whole.
Yeah.
And we're needing wholeness. And so, you know, one of the reasons why I really wanted to invite you on is because you have such, well, number one, you've got a way of pointing to the hearts of issues, but not oversimplifying, because this is not like this is a very convoluted, nuanced thing. And so we've got to, and I was telling Jermaine, and by the way, just call me Catherine. We're good. We got the doctor thing over. We're good. So I was telling Jermaine, you know, just how much I've been needing to up ramp, because part of this is I really don't follow the news that much because it's pretty stinky most of the time. And it's very, you know, there's just stuff flying all the time, particularly in election year, right?
Yeah.
But I've had to repent, because the thing is, if I'm purporting love when there are just spin outs that love needs to speak into, you can't sit on the sidelines and la la land and say grace, grace, love, love. You know what I mean? You can't. Because when a certain sect of society is hemorrhaging out, okay, you can't just pass by and say that's okay. And in the place where we're not relating, we're all hemorrhaging. When one of us is hurting, we all hurt. And this is not a finger pointing. It's an invitation to really be able to walk out the love mandate that we've been given, that we are to love one another as Christ loved us. So what does that look like? What is helpful? I think a lot of times too, for me, and I'm going to let you speak in just a second, but a lot of times for me, I've had to actually even back up with my language, because I think language is huge. And what I'm saying, and I think, wow, I'm being loving and whatever, sometimes feels like a slap in the face to people where I'm not understanding what that's meaning to them. So all of that. So just having to do a lot of repenting, happy to do it. You know, you come before Jesus, what is not looking like love? Oh, Catherine, that's not looking like love. So that can come up higher. And there's not a lick of condemnation in it, but there is an invitation. You know, the Lord is speaking to me about upgrades on the other side of a vast shaking. And the worst things are, the more that needs to be upgraded, the more that needs to be shaken. That whatever's not of love's kind, that's got to go. And so anyway, so that's kind of a little bit my process. Jermaine, just start to help us, Jermaine. Help us.
Yeah. No, it's you're absolutely right that, you know, the conversation and the dialogue that needs to occur, and is occurring, and I'm amazed by that, and I'm grateful that you're doing this and giving an opportunity for someone to come on and to share and to speak into this, and you yourself addressing it as well. But yeah, as what I was saying about, you know, my work and function and restoring families, there's a model of approach, you know, that we do in social services, and that deals with assessment. You know, we have to assess. And so the family goes through an assessment period, you know, where you assess, because issues are very nuanced in life. And so when you get a family in, it's easy to judge a person, you know, according to their actions and the things that they do, their indiscretions and things like that. But when you get into the moment and you ask those hard questions, and you help them and guide them to awaken and become aware, because there are things that they did as parents that they not necessarily was aware was against the law, you know, or things like that. And so you have to assess. And so in this moment, everybody, you know, white, black, you know, your nationality, culture, everybody has to self-assess. And so it's this opportunity for all of us to self-assess, you know, and to ask the hard questions. You know, am I implicit in this in some way? You know, have I attributed, you know, to discord, or have not been engaging enough or relational enough? I know for me personally, I say, God, listen, because my culture, my context has always been an African American church. And I love it. But when you read through the scriptures and you notice, like or in Revelations, it said there was a number that couldn't be counted, that was from every tongue and nation. And so there was this collective of God that is seen in every man, but yet unique to their culture and their context. And I said, listen, I don't want to just have Black friends, or associate with the body of Christ. I want to be a part of, that's reflective of heaven's culture and Father's heart. And so I had to be intentional in that. I had to be engaging in that. Some things God kind of came in and moved supernaturally and adjusted some things like that. But in my life, that has always been my heart, is to be engaging and intentional outside of people that think and look different than I do. And that's not just on the issue of race and culture, but it also politically, and views and perspectives. And so that's my heart. And I think that self-assessment is a great place to start, as well as, because one of the key parts, in helping and functioning with families is being an active listener. And so active listening is not just hearing, lend by talk. Active listening is fully engaged. You're looking at the person, your body language speaks to that. And so you're asking questions and you're listening. And then you ask more questions that are gauged to get the person to talk more, to listen at a heart level. And that's been a part of my prayer is, Father, help me to engage and resonate with people at a heart level. I don't want to be there, right? I want to be, I want to meet people where they are, have an understanding heart, and not judge or condemn them, but to resonate with people on a heart level and be relational. And so self-assessment, I think, is a good place to start.
Wow, that's really beautiful. And I think too, that's really beautiful. And I think too, bringing your heart before the Lord, like, because you can self-assess,
Yep.
but when the Lord is all about pruning us and manifesting the sons and daughters of God and unveiling us. And so what is veiled? What is veiling me, God, from being who I am?
Yeah.
And in the place where he made us, one race, with multiple different cultures, nationalities, it's gorgeous. So we're not homogeneous,
Right.
but we're diverse and all reflections of who God is. And that's the glory, and that's the beauty, and that's the joy that we can have. I mean, Jesus prayed that we would be one as him and the Father are one, him and us and him, that we would be one in him, and that glory that streams from it. So it's such an invitation for that manifestation, as the Lord is speaking me upgrades, this is what's on the other side. You see,
Yeah.
because when I'm not engaging with someone who doesn't look like me or think like me or vote like me or whatever the thing is, I'm missing out
Yeah.
on the beauty of Jesus manifested on the earth. And so it's part of heaven on earth that we come together and enjoy one another, even though we're different and we can disagree. That's okay. But love is disagreeing on the thing of love. That's the one thing we were commanded.
Yeah.
And so how does my heart get to resonate with you? How does my heart get to resonate with all the sorts of different people that don't look like me? And it's been, it's interesting, as I kind of went out in my own ministry, the one community that really, like, yes, talk for us, speak to us, whatever, was the Black community. It was awesome. And I'm not saying any bashing my white kid, they're probably just full up or whatever that is. But, and it's been a humbling, beautiful experience to be embraced. When I'm this, little white girl, whatever, you know what I mean? I get to be me and you get to be you and all of that. But it was such a beautiful thing. And it's so ministered to my heart
Yeah.
to have that. And so that's one of the beauties of online ministry, because we can, connect outside of our four walls or whatever. What other things would you recommend? Say, okay, so, in terms of trying to understand, and I know you're not the spokesperson for all Black America, whatever, but you have an experience and a grid that many of us do not have. And, one of the things is I've been reaching out to those in the Black community that are, hurting or just vocal or all of that, is I've realized I've had some real, as a white person, had some real blinders, even in my semantics, even
Yep.
in my mottos, what I'm rallying behind, you know what I mean? Help us understand like some of the things as a maybe a white culture, that means well, and some of us don't mean well, I mean, this is what that is. Understand some of the ways that we are contributing to the pain of the Black community.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I believe a lot of leaders and people are speaking on it. Like Vanessa, she was on with Eric Reeder, and it was really phenomenal. So I would encourage those that are listening to pivot that way as well, and listen to Vanessa.
And Vanessa, what's her last name?
I believe it's Brooks. She's I'll get back to that. If I'm not saying her name right, I'll come
Okay.
back to that. But anyway, Eric Reeder hosted
Mhm.
I believe her name is Vanessa, and they had a real awesome dialogue. And one of the things is that she was homing in on or talking about, with things about the implicit bias, and she talked about the microaggression. Again, that all speaks about being self-aware, being aware, of your blinders. And then also too, when it comes to saying that when African American people, are saying Black Lives Matter, uh, don't come back with all lives matter. What we're saying is that we're not saying that white lives doesn't matter. We're not saying that other lives doesn't matter. But in this moment, we're saying because of historically, relationally, when it comes to African Americans' relationship with the judicial system, the law enforcement system, it has not been a great relationship. It has been very abusing, oppressive. And so when we say in Black Lives Matter, we want it to be embedded into the conscious mindset of every American, to that the value of life, including that of African American and Black life, has value, worth, and meaning. And so, just as equally as other lives, but in this moment, in this situation. And so, what often happens is you may get a pundit or someone, they may quote a certain statistic. And so, for example, you may have patient A, that's representative of a small sampling population of the Black community dealing with heart disease. And you may have patient B, who is, a white American from a small sample community. And they do this study, right? And it's just about heart disease.
Mhm.
And so, we find out that the African American male at a certain age has more of a disposition to heart disease and exposure than a white male. Okay, that's fine. That's the data, that's the research. But because the issue is so nuanced, you have to go in and you have to dig into that and ask why. Ask the why
Sure.
questions. The
Sure.
why questions leads you to the heart, intent, and purpose of a thing. And so when you ask the why questions, then you come to find out that this sampling population, they had no economic access. They had no, it was food deserts, medical resources, and things like that. So now you see the nuance of an issue versus just what you read, in data points.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so that's what often happens in the conversation too, is that well, data says that more whites are killed more than Blacks, but the data doesn't deal with the nuanced issue about the historical relationship that African Americans have had with respect to its government, with respect to its police department, and with respect to the judicial system. And so you have things where the military did experiments, on African American men. I think it's the Tuskegee experiment. You have, but definitely Jim Crow is one of the biggest ones and the obvious ones. Slavery is another big one. And so historically, that's our relationship, with a system. And then today, there's a mayor locally here in a small African American community. Is mixed, but she became the first African American female to become mayor of this small town in Kankakee. And so, as long as we're still celebrating the first Black this and the first Black that, that says we've come a long way, but it says that we have a long way to go.
Sure, of course, of course. And one of the things that I think that I was really so appreciating as we're doing these self-assessments and that kind of thing, to really, I tell people to resist condemnation like they resist sin,
Yeah.
because there's no condemnation in Christ. Okay. But in the place where there's no condemnation, there is a call to be up higher. There is conviction. There is being convinced of, wow, there's a higher way of seeing.
Yeah.
And so, so as we're doing these self-assessments, this is not a condemnation. This is not shaming. This is not finger pointing, but we're all being called up to a higher level. And, and I appreciated that, because when I initially sort of started doing all this research about Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter and all that kind of stuff, I didn't realize, listen, if you're the one that's hemorrhaging out, okay, it doesn't mean that everyone else on the streets don't matter, but the one that's in pain, the one that is vulnerable, the one that's been harmed, like on an ongoing, even chronic, under the radar and above the radar level, that's what needs to be attended to. So when one of my kids is sick, you know what, I'm not really, massaging feet or doing whatever for my other kids. I'm focusing on the one that is ill.
That's right.
And that doesn't mean they don't matter. It means that the one that's harmed it, and when we say that all lives, it's like a slap in the face. It's like, wait a second, I have not been healed yet of not mattering, of being invalidated, of being sidelined. That's a broken heart.
Yeah.
And when you're born into that, I know what it's like to feel that for different things with my gender and that kind of thing. But we can't belittle or invalidate or whatever that whole thing until all of us are valued intrinsically, because that's how God sees us. We're not all okay, and we're still in process of arriving. And when there's systemic things that, by reason of, and there's a lot of things I think too with the white population, I was interesting as I was talking to some other of my brothers that are African American. We were talking about backgrounds. I mean, my background, my ancestors had their own issues, mega issues, but they weren't slaveholders.
Right.
And so, and not being, it maybe yours were. And so in the place where you're not responsible for your ancestors, but you are culpable for you. And so this is not a shaming. And if you feel like you're going to be shamed, you're not free to explore. And that's true on any end of it. We're all culpable. We're all called to be powerful people. We're not victims, but we're called to be powerful. But there are areas that we have been victimized that we need to own. And that's all of us. That makes us powerful.
Yeah.
So in that exploration, be free to do that without condemnation. And that's what allows us to really own what we need to own.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's articulately that's powerful. If we just take a moment just to meditate in that. But yeah, you're right. It's another aspect to that is the cultural competency part, and being competent in that area of understanding other cultures. And that means to be, again, that self-assessment, to being intentional, and to learning. And so, for example, I was sharing with someone, I said, is a cultural context, for an example. My son, he lives in Chicago. He goes and he commutes to school, and so he was in the thick of the rioting and the looting and things like that was going on top of the protests. And so, like I was sharing with a particular brother I had a conversation with, I said, now my context and my reality is that in his neighborhood he doesn't have to worry about being assessed because of his color, his skin,
Right.
because his neighbors are reflective of him,
Mm-hmm.
So when he's leaving out, our context is not, he's not worried about his neighbors saying, oh, well, I don't know about that guy. But we have to worry about not only the police, but he also has to worry about the gangs. And so that's the context, is that, not only do I have to worry, I have to educate him on, when you engage the police, make sure your hands out your pocket. We have to have those conversations. And then I also have to have the conversation, when you wear your ear pods, your Apple ear pods, don't wear them out there, when you get in certain neighborhoods and things like that. So for a lot of African American minorities in communities, like urban centers like Chicago or certain sections of Chicago, that's their context. So it's not just dealing with the police and fearing the police and fearing that, hey, if I get pulled over, being racially profiled, that's just one issue. Then if I'm arrested, the judicial system and getting the book don't let you the bail rate, for an African American male versus a white male is exacerbated, is ridiculous in cities like Chicago. And so I have to worry about that. Then I have to worry about, the element of crime, in our communities. And so I was sharing with the brother, it's like, we can't win for lose. And so that is a lot of part of the context, the frustration. So when you're speaking about the broken heart, I just want to give substance to, that broken heart or person being in a broken place. And so when you're watching the news and you're seeing a person's life, being snuffed from them on television, and this white guy has his knee on this man's neck, so that's a triggering moment, for a lot of us. It's triggering, your trauma, just being in violence, is traumatic in of itself. Growing up in a community, is traumatic. People are not, that's not everybody's experience. It's not normal to be raised in a culture where, or in a community or in a cultural setting where you have to lay on the ground, because gunshots are going out, and everybody have to be safe. That's not everybody's reality. And so, but this is the reality that a lot of African American people live in, that comes from urban centers like Minneapolis, Chicago, Detroit, LA, and other communities. And so when you see that context, it's automatically a trigger. And it's triggering all kinds of emotions and trauma, memory, post-traumatic stress disorder. That is a part of the broken heart, or the bleeding heart of the African American community. Then compound that with, historical racism, systematic racism, and issues of these systematic things, systems of oppression. And so you say, that's the bleeding heart, that's the bleeding community. And so when we're saying Black Lives Matter, we're saying, listen, come in, come into this moment with us, and empathize with us, empathize, with like what I'm sharing today, empathize with that, put yourself in our shoes just for one moment. And that's where that self-assessment also part comes in is putting yourself in someone else's shoes and seeing things from their perspective. This is where being open-minded helps us, so that we can better gauge and understand, another person's perspective in how their lens and how they see the world from their perspective.
Yeah, that's really overwhelming. Wow, I'm about ready to ball here. I've never had to have a conversation with my son of anything that you've had to have. We've had lots of issues, whatever, but never had to have based on his race. It's just been a non-thing. We don't have gunshots in our neighborhood. There's all sorts of privileges and blessing, whatever you want to say, that and me and my family have had that others don't. And and one of the things too that that's just heartbreaking, and I'm sorry.
Yeah.
With all of that, and one of the things that is so important as we rally around one another let me say this. If you want to diffuse someone who is enraged, okay, because they've just, whatever, they're just enraged, if you want to diffuse that, you listen and you care.
Yep.
And and I would say, if for anybody who has been oppressed in whatever way, and and we've all suffered oppression, but not so systemically,
Yep.
and from birth, and layer upon layer upon, it's just one thing after the next after the next. I mean, no wonder. I mean, let me say this: with all that stress, why would you not have more heart disease? I'm just saying. Okay,
Exactly.
right? I mean, they're just one thing after the next. And so with all of that, with all that hurt, not being understood, not being cared about, not being whatever, glossed over, being invisible in that way, or whatever that is, many people are going to be enraged. And so that's feeding into the violence that we're seeing.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's okay to be violent, but I'm saying you can understand the rage.
Yep.
Jesus said, be angry and sin not. Well, there's a lot to be angry about.
Yep.
And, and in the place where there's so much hurt and it hasn't been acknowledged, it hasn't been listened to, it has been glossed over. Some people are living in comfort, relative comfort, not that we don't have our struggles. And others are it's just one thing after the next. Well, you know what? It's not okay. And that matters.
Yep.
That matters. And it needs, so, Jesus said a soft answer turns away wrath. Well, he didn't really say that, but he said that through the word. So, so how do we answer? Well, number we don't act like we know it all. We don't act like been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. I know that, and this is my thing. So let me go back and tell you my thing.
Right.
That's not the time for that. It's not like your thing is not, it is pertinent. It all matters. I'll say that it all matters. But when you're an African American and this is your reality, that needs to be acknowledged. And then we need to look for ways to help overcome. And there are no easy answers.
That's right.
But being cared about, I mean, let me tell you, we are mandated to love, and love cares. Love cares. Love says it matters, and you matter, and what you've been through matters. And I don't even know what it means to be born in that. And all of that, it matters. It doesn't mean we're shaming one people. So we can't, you can't own your stuff. You're going to feel you're going to be shamed, but it does mean like, wow, I had no idea. I had no idea. And even if I had an idea and it was up here, but my heart was disconnected and I wasn't, reaching out to people in our backyard. You know what I mean? We've all seen those things with the starving kids and whatever. And sometimes it's so overwhelming. You're like, I can't watch it anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. But, this is a thing in our community, and the ones that have the more influence and more power we really do need to speak up. Jesus, knowing that he'd been given all authority, I mean, cosmic power, cosmic authority, his first thing was leaning down to wash his disciples' feet. Well, and then he said, okay, now as I've done this, do this for others. So there's something we can all do. And, we don't need to be so overwhelmed that we do nothing. We do not need to, we should not be condemned that we feel shut down and defensive. Let's link arms. What can we do for, and the fact that people care and are doing something, that's healing, even as we're working to the more systemic things that, we don't have complete control over. But it does come down to us, as far as it with us, be at peace, right? What does love look like here? And engaging with Jesus, because I believe he's bringing this to the surface so that we can all be upgraded.
That's right.
This is not I'm pouring out my bowls of wrath. No, this is ugly. This is not okay. We maybe participated in a passive way. Maybe we participated in an active way. There's all sorts of subconscious crap that we have that he needs to bring to the surface as well. But we can trust him. This is love who's bringing us all up and bringing us all together the way we really are. And so we can yield to that and invite that process and help one another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Reformation is never pretty. Historically, Reformation has never been pretty. It has always been ugly, when it comes to, Reformation. And one of the central terms to Jesus's message, was metanoia, which is to change the way you think. And so we're at this place of junction, where Reformation is coming, whether you want it or not, and it's
Yes.
global in nature.
Yeah.
And it said it's
Amazing.
time to change, systematically, institutionally, and individually on the individual level in your thinking. It's time to have a mind change, repent, return from a low state of thinking and perceptions about the world around you into a higher state of living and thinking and being and doing, which is global in nature, which is universal in nature, of seeing that every man, woman, and child bears the image of God, and addressing and dealing with them from that perspective. I like Bishop Jamie says, don't speak to the sin in people, speak to the son in people, and it is easy, to label a certain segment of the population, according to the certain actions of the few, and media sensationalizes that, and characterize the community. And so even in that regard, we have to address the media and what the media is putting out. And you said it accurately, that media, perpetuates a certain narrative, and sometimes you just gotta, get out of that place, of what media is perpetuating. But this reformation, this change, is global in nature. And so then your heart says an injustice here and an injustice there, is an injustice everywhere, and we all distinct in our voices, our platforms, or, wherever we are, in our place of authority or influence, we can speak to an issue of injustice. We can speak, to a matter, or just to be present in the moment, be present in the moment. If you want to help, be present in the moment with the Black Lives Matter moment and movement that's taking place. And it's not just this issue alone. This thing is going to snowball to address other injustices, and this thing is happening on other continents. And so humanity is waking up, to saying, listen, I am an individual to be loved and valued and not oppressed. And so we are addressing systems of oppression, whether if it's politically, ideologically, within institutions and systems. Institutions, are dealing with change and reformation. The old approach that this is how it's always been, this is how we're going to always do it, is over with. Okay,
Right.
so it's a wholesale change holistically that's taking place within, this Black Lives Matters movement here in America, whether it's our brothers and sisters over in Hong Kong, that are coming against oppressive regimes, or what took place in the Arab Spring in the Middle East, is being empathetic, with all of humanity. This is a human injustice, not just a Black injustice, but it's a human injustice. If we can relate, in that respect, then we can definitely resonate at a heart level and champion and putting those arms together, like you said, together. And then our power together becomes a force multiplier that says, hey, institution or entity or laws, you have to change. Listen, the status quo is unacceptable and it has to change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I hope this gives me a tremendous amount of hope, is what I'm saying. I don't want to be, it's important to grieve with those who grieve in
Yes.
that, but there is a place past grief.
Yep.
Where that we can move, that the Lord is, I believe the Lord, he's just got his foot on this, and he's not going to back off.
No, he's not.
Because as for sons and daughters to manifest, we need to look like love.
Yes,
and so anything that is not of love's kind is being shaken off.
That's it.
And that's a level playing ground for every single human being on the planet. It says some human beings need more attention right now.
Yeah.
So this is not, I point the finger at you and you point the finger back, and we just, this is so unhelpful. So what is helpful? Well, it's allowing the Lord to reveal that. And then systemically with that as well, what are some good questions now that we're talking about metanoia, be transformed by the renewing of your mind, and all of that. So this is transformation. This is another word for transformation is the word transfiguration.
Yeah.
That is the
Come
being
on.
unveiled, so that the glory inside that's in every single human being, that is unveiled into the image and likeness of the one who created them, which is the person of love. And so all of that. So what are some good questions for us to grapple with? Do you want to weigh in on that, Jermaine?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a lot of great questions we can start with. We can start with, I think I said it earlier, what are my blind spots? You can start right there. What are your blind spots?
Yeah, we all
And
got them.
so, yeah, because we all
Yeah.
have them,
Mhm.
and deal with that. And like you said too, is that one-on-one with you and dad, with father in conversation. And you can ask friends, of loved ones and things like that too. People that know you best, that can help assess, you and where you are and where you miss it, in that regard. But two, we can ask uh, um, in moments. There was a brother I was talking to, a Caucasian brother. He's a missionary, and he said, and he's from Canada. He said that that his context when he came to America and into the American church, uh, um, that was his first time encountering, racist Christians, for him. And it just totally threw him off. But they'll say certain things, with a black person not around, but they had those type of conversations. And so in those moments, you need to ask yourself, will I speak out? I know times and situations in circus, it's hard to speak out because of a certain
Sure.
relational dynamic, that's there, and so we're just quiet. And so again, like you said, it's not about being a condemnation thing, but allow that conviction in your heart, in that moment, and addressing it. I'm not saying go on a whole parade or things like that, but there are certain methods that hold people accountable in certain systems. So like here locally, for example, while this was going on, a Caucasian lady took to social media and was saying some very racist things. So what we did locally here, she worked at a local Kroger's. So they took the information to the Kroger's, and they addressed it. And the young lady is no longer working at Kroger's. Well, that's great. That's a victory, I guess, in some sense. But the true victory is her having a change of heart and mind.
That's what you want.
Right.
Is
That's
a
what I
change
really
of
want.
heart. You don't
Yeah.
want to everybody booted out of their jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, because the bottom line, none of us would be working if we were all, you know what I mean? If we were all convicted on our
Right.
crap,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I'm
So
just saying, but you want a
yeah,
heart change.
no. Yeah. So, changing the heart and the mind
Yeah.
is real
Mhm.
victory. So, what part can I play,
Mhm.
in leading an effort, wherever I am within the context of my family, conversation, within the context of your family with your children, and have those conversations, but the questions, I think, number one is, what are my blinders? Number two is, where have I been implicit, in this, and then making the change, as you become aware, and then you adjust and you make the changes, in your life. And that's a start, along with conversations like this that we're having.
Right, exactly. And I think it's really important that those places where you're doing that soul searching, allowing the Lord into those places, in the context when God convicts us, it kind of it hurts, but it feels good,
Yeah.
right? Because we know it's like crap. Yeah, that's okay. That's right, right. We know in our knower, but it's a safe place to allow that to be touched. And he doesn't sometimes, there's a time to rip off the whole band-aid, and sometimes you just need a little half of it because that's all you can stand.
Yeah.
And God knows exactly, because we got a ways to go to be unveiled in the image and likeness of love himself, right? But there needs to be safe. So when you're So it's important if people are coming to you and saying, are there areas, well, let's be kind in
Yeah.
our, well, this is what I've seen. Okay. And let's make it a safe place for people
That's
to
it.
examine some ugly things, because this is coming out of internal ugliness that is projected outward and
That's right.
creates whole systems around it. Right. So we need to be a safe place for one another, and then allow one another the process that we need. Because we all, the thing is, just because it's the whole log in each other's eyes, right? Okay, so you get a log, and maybe I have a splinter, but I'm not going to be arrogant in my splinter because I've got a splinter. Okay.
Right.
And maybe I'm the one with the log and you're with a splinter, but either way, we're all growing.
That's right.
And all of that, and yielding to that process rather than self-justifying and defending, because we all have crap to own. If everybody owns their crap, it's a really happy world.
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it, if we all owned our crap, it would be awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
But we're all getting better, and we're all, I mean, this is where the Lord is leading us, and he's not going to take his foot off the gas. He's going to keep on. He is, you know what? Love is relentless
Yeah.
to get rid of anything that's not of love's kind.
Yes, I love it like this. I think we said on one of the shows is that, love demands equity, and so, until there is a manifestation of that, it's established in the spirit. Equity is established in the spirit. Love demands it. But in the natural, known, felt realm, or the spillover, that's what's taking place, is that love is like, listen, this is not equity. This is not reflective of Father's heart.
Right.
And so this is why we're addressing these areas of injustice. We thought it was, okay. And Father's like, no, he ripping this Band-Aid off and saying,
Right.
listen, it's time for all of humanity to heal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Everybody. And, and I just want to say this too, because I've heard people say, well, the gospel is really not about racial issues. Well, Jesus addressed racial issues. He totally did. I mean, the Samaritans, that were the kind of the downtrodden race of the day. Okay. Well, Jesus, it was a non-negotiable. I mean, he would pursue and he would demand, like, no, I'm going to treat you like a human being. I'm going to treat you with honor. I'm going to treat you as, if you're not receiving me and we're calling to rain down, fire and brimstone on you, well, you don't know what spirit you're of. So there's a spirit that's not of Jesus, and then there's a spirit that is of love. So he absolutely dealt with racial issues.
Yes, he did.
Now, let me tell you one thing he didn't do, and this is kind of a good thing. I'm glad I thought of this because I've been meaning to bring it up.
Right.
He really did not take sides politically.
That's it.
He really did not. And when we politicize one side as being, good, and the other side as being demon, and there are fingers. As I said, I really hate election years because it just brings out the grodiest. I don't know who to like anymore, but whatever. Okay, whatever. But he really, because that was a kingdom of this world, and his was a higher kingdom.
Yeah.
Is the kingdom of love, the kingdom of God, whoever. So what does that look like? Because the bottom line, okay, one way or the other, I'm not saying politically we need reform, absolutely, but I feel like that's across the board, right? So he wasn't taking sides. And so our hope is not in, by all means, vote, please do that and vote your conscience. But you don't need to be demonized on one side or the other. Right. And I've been on all sides of the issue. So that's not where our hope is.
Right.
Our hope is in God. And I think it's really important not to try to make Jesus's message my political party's message, because everybody says Jesus is on my side. Right. And it's like, he is, because he's on everybody's side. So let's get the crap out of the way and focus on what really matters. So did you want to speak into that at all, Jermaine?
I sure do. And I would say it like this, that, and I've said this, and I shared this on my post, that, let's not make it an ideological, argument. This is a human argument, in a human cause. And so if you're going to deal with the ideological stuff, be objective, with your ideological stuff, with being empathetic. Okay.
Mhm.
So, if you're going to do that, but what I'm going to say here is that we point out the flaws of white evangelicalism, right? White evangelicalism has so the right has its own politics and religion.
Yeah.
The left has its own politics and religion. And so I say Black liberation theology and white evangelicalism, to me, is two sides of the same coin. And so if we're going to advocate, let's be a kingdomcrat, okay? And being a kingdomcrat is saying and communicating and conveying what is true of all mankind, what has always been true of all mankind. Being a kingdomcrat is being intentional to convey and to show and to model, what does heaven looks like. So Jesus said it like this. He said, hey, we've been with the Father. He said, no, the disciples asking, show us the Father. Where's the Father? You've been talking about the Father all this time. And Jesus said, well, hey, I tell you what, when you look at me, you see the Father in me. So I'm the Father. And so we get to say that in our lives as well. We get to show the world what Father looks like. And he's beautiful. He comes in various colors, distinct cultures, and cultural contexts. And so we all bear and reflect the image of Father. And so if we can associate, here no man after the flesh, but the spirit, and address and deal with each other, but everybody is not there. So we have to model that for the world around us. I have to model that, here in my home. I have to model that in my workplace. We are given opportunities to model what Father looks like, in our daily lives. So I say that about politics.
Yes, thank you. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I mean, there really is a higher way, even though we're living in the world, and we really do. We need to weigh in, and we need to do all that. I mean, I really feel like we need to vote our conscience, but recognize that's not where our hope is. Even as God is reforming on so many different levels, and so and if you're feeling overwhelmed, I just feel like you just really need to retreat to the Lord, who really does have his kids, all his kids, at heart, and is conforming all of us into that image, unveiling us into that image. And he's really masterful at that. And I also feel like, too, in the areas where you've been personally injured, that is a place, pursuing wholeness, however that looks like, is really incumbent. I think sometimes we feel like that's kind of a fluffy, buffy thing. The thing is, if we're whole on the inside, we're able to bring wholeness on the outside. And so many of our biases and our blind spots come from the places where we've been injured, where we've been triggered, where we believe the lies that have been implanted subconsciously, all of those things. And we speak out of our brokenness.
Yes.
And so where we have opportunity, and I believe that if you're like, well, I'm needing help with this, I believe God will provide in your journey, in the places where my own heart, I need that shored up, so that I can begin to speak out of wholeness and be a conduit of love versus a conduit of my own brokenness, and the filters that those are being peeled off, because we've all been harmed.
Yeah.
We've all been harmed, and it all matters.
Yeah.
It all matters. But I do feel like that is an area where we can be powerful.
Yes.
And responsible for our own well-being, rather than pointing fingers at our victimizers, whether it's a race or men or women or whatever it is. It's pointing fingers is never helpful, because it disempowers you, and you are in victim mode. And God did not make you a victim, even though there is so much victimization that needs, and those that have been victimized and cut off at the knees need to be spoken for.
Yes.
Need to be stood up for. But in and of ourselves, it's not a, well, I'm let off the hook, I don't have to do anything because I've been victimized, because that's kind of the human race, some more than others, for sure. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, the last few days, or week or so, Father's been speaking to me, and he said, you are powerful. you are powerful. And I shared this with a brother of mine the other day. I said, in as much as we look at Father and we say, man, God is all powerful. God is like out, God is huge. He's powerful. He's all knowing. In as much as we marvel in awe of Father being powerful, he's in us.
Exactly.
So we are just as much as powerful as we view in awe of Father. We are in that same awe of power. And so when we come to a place of dialogue or engagement, we're not engaging from a place of victimhood or being or victimization. We're negotiating or engaging from a place of power, And so I was sharing that a lot of people have been saying 400 years of oppression, 400 years. And what I wanted to do in that moment, I just wanted to reframe it and saying, yes, 400 years in the face of oppression has been Black brilliance, has been Black coalition building, has been a strength, a momentum that has been building over those 400 years in the face of oppression. And so it's not from a place of being victimized. It's from a place of power that we get to speak our part in innovation and in innovating a part of this culture and building up this nation. And so it's from a place of power in the face of oppression. I'm here because my ancestors survived and they were resilient in the face of oppression. So that's the reason I'm here, is because of their power. And so I get to pull from their power, the collective power that's innate in every human being, to engage these systems and address them and require them or demand them to change. From a spiritual element, I get to declare that. And then in a natural place, a platform like this and other places, to engage social media, whatever, and speak from a place of power and demand that the love in me demands equity.
Yeah, that's great. Wow, that is powerful. That's awesome. So we're kind of closing. Oh my goodness, I can't believe the hour has flown by. Final comments, concerns, admonitions, whatever.
Yeah, sure.
Close us out.
Just number one, again, thank you, for creating this platform, and being engaging and intentional, and as well as myself, for all of us to be intentional and to be engaging, in this moment. The Black Lives Matter movement, or the phrase, is different from the organization, because that's out there as well. So separate that out, from the organizations, and just let's focus on the phrase, and the human heart issue that's behind it.
I think that's great too. And I think that's a really important thing, because not everybody agrees with everything that the organization stands for.
Right.
But oh my goodness, we can rally around the heart and the lives, the Black lives. We can rally. That is a God thing. It's beautiful.
Yes,
yeah. Well, I'm so grateful for you, and so grateful for you coming and sharing. I love you, Jermaine. You are a blessing to my life and to so many. And thank you for all the wisdom and that you brought. You're amazing. I'm grateful for you.
Thank you. I'm grateful for you as well, Catherine. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, we're going to have to wrap it up, but so make sure you share this and take advantage of the wisdom that's been shared. And Jermaine, if someone wants to contact you, where do they find you?
Yeah, listen, find me, Jermaine Thomas, on social media. Send me a friend request. I do the hashtag natural theologian. So you can put that in there, and you can search for me there. And lastly, it was Eric Reeder and Vanessa R. Brooks. They did a platform called Here and Healed. So just earlier I mentioned that, but yeah, Eric Reeder and Vanessa Brooks.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jermaine. We will keep in touch.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Well, love you. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.